Thanks, Pete.
I'm sure
Let's get
I don't know if they
let's
just
get
do it
the
either. I
facility
wasn't.
guy in
Have a
here.
piece of it.
Is that all from the mom?
That did it.
That'll do it.
That's a lot.
It's Jim's still.
Where were you this
I
morning?
had somebody that's moving furniture there.
Yeah, I think they.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, they were supposed to be shut off.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Put somebody else on.
That was it, I knew it was very distracting, these guys.
I think we have.
I'll let Bob do that.
This is not the agenda topic, so I don't think we can get too deep into it. But I really think it's important because of that vehicle abatement program that was set up now about 7 or 8 years ago. We have not collected any money to my knowledge in the last year or two, but we still have this pot of money that's been sitting there for, seems like for a long period of time, and it can only be used for, in a certain instance. And so maybe our new council, working with our new administrator, can, instead of letting this drag on and, 10 years from now having it become an issue, we need to find out what, we need to, first of all, the agreement with the city has more or less dissolved. I mean, there hasn't been a meeting of this board that, initially Bob and I went to these meetings for about, we had 1 or 2 meetings for the year, and then we went for about 5 years with no meetings at all, and then they had to have an emergency meeting to get some paper filed. So, in the whole time that this has been around, I've been to maybe 3 meetings supposedly as a rep. I finally took it off my disclosure form because to me it's a non-functioning entity, but at the same time there's this money that's attached to it. And we need to dispose of that in a proper way. If the state's gonna rip it off, they're gonna rip it off. If we can somehow beat them to the punch and figure out how that money could be transferred into a fund, a recycling fund, as Mr. Glenn has pointed out, if we can use it to put in a pad or establish a site or do something that could be utilized by the private sector in a partnership to, take care of any future needs, that's to our best interest. But, that money's like sitting there and it's gonna become more of a problem as time goes on. And I like to see us address that maybe as a separate agenda item after staff can do the appropriate research. And it sounds like Mr. Glenn has a lot more information about that than our staff has, and I'd recommend that they get a hold of him and try to coordinate, because I'd like to see something constructive that could be beneficial to the people of the county rather than have it be ripped off for some bullet train or something.
I think it's quite clear that the state has not been able to give us any assurance that the money would be returned to the taxpayers, the individual taxpayers here in Lassen County, that it would just go into their general fund or some other use.
I've saved
And
all my
if they were to
DMV
try-
registration, so I can give you documentation of the $15 that I probably have in this fund.
Well, the point being, if the state controller's office were to try, they'd bill us for the effort.
Well, right now, the auditor is apparently dealing with it, but I don't think it's an issue that the auditor should necessarily sort out. I think it's something that we need to take care of on a policy level and get that resolved, and maybe get some special legislation, and maybe Mr. Dolly and Mr. Gaines could handle for us to get that money redirected back to us that could be used for some public benefit.
So my point was that if the county had a facility that was disposing of these vehicles, there wouldn't be the need to have that fee for the community, correct? That wouldn't ever.
Well, that money
That was my
the-
understanding
The purpose of the money was to
yesterday.
pay the tow bill to get somebody like Mr. Phillips or wherever to haul the vehicle to a place like where Mr. Glenn can then take it and do something with it.
But if the private sector's handling the car crushing, the market's decent, we don't need to
No.
subsidize it. That was my point. The reason why I say it should be in here, we should recognize it as a priority, because, the community's been taxed 120 grand or whatever, that they don't need to be. We need to have a facility to take care of it with private enterprise. It's $120,000, that's been sucked out of the community for no reason. And
Maury, what's it
still
gonna
sitting in
take
the account.
to get Tom up and running in the car crushing business?
Well, they have a zone that you can apply
If
for.
he's willing,
Yeah,
excuse me. Okay.
it's a use permit and
What's the use permit
that use permit is probably 5 something,
5,000.
and, no, 500 and something, and the initial study 611, and there's fish and game fees if it were all to go well, which are probably,
What does fish and game have to do with car crushing?
they'd be involved with the environmental document, and they have, fish and game fees are about $2,000 at the end.
Same thing they had to do with motocross.
Yeah.
They got to deal with everything, these guys.
You know, like I say, when my son bought the other piece of M1 up the street, he sent his manager in. And it was all about, wasn't about the $2,500 or whatever. It was just about what he labeled as unfair conditions being stuck on him compared to somebody else. I mean, you gotta realize he's not gonna go up there and make an unsightly thing. There's nothing unsightly about his operation up there. I mean, it's a scrapyard. But it's one of the cleanest ones in all of California. It just, you need to let him, I mean, you need to say, okay, well, what do you need? But we've never been asked that question, ever. It's this, we want 40 conditions. Can't have that. Can't have things that don't even relate to it. I'm sorry, but that's what's happened in the past, and that's what needs to stop, or you're never gonna have a facility, like he said this morning. It's, you know, common sense is one thing. I don't care if you have a farm tractor or whatever, you break a hose, you're gonna spill oil on the ground or something else. That part is inevitable as far as you got more oil dripping in Walmart's parking lot than has ever been spilled at Bullseye. But you need to just use some common sense as far as what you want, what kind of condition. Like you say, the conditions are pretty much set in stone with the state. This is what you gotta have. You gotta have some capture thing, you gotta have this, you gotta have that.
Do you have that already?
We have all that at the thing. When the crusher was set up at Bullseye where it is now, we had a full containment system underneath the machine. So there was no chance of spilling a drop of oil on the ground. And it's just not about draining cars either. Everything that comes into there, say you bring a motor block or a rear end housing or anything, everything has to go into the shop and over a drain tank, and it has to be drained. You just can't ship it with a bunch of oil in it. All that stuff has to be environmentally done safe. And so,
Heavier.
yeah, I mean, you know, it's just, it's common sense, but that's the law, that's what you gotta do, and that's the way it's done. And you know, it's like you say, you built a $200,000 building to do that sort of stuff. So,
But to answer your question, I think there's two different sites in the site that Mr. Glenn.
the new site's the M1, and he went and bought exclusively for the crush a car, and he sent his guy up to the county, and they hand us a list of conditions this big. You can't do that.
But the site with.
The site where we're at is where we crushed it.
It has a different zoning that doesn't allow crushing, is that right?
Right.
And that zoning should be changed. We're the only piece of zone that touches the airport that's not in one.
What is that now, Tom?
That is CT for knickknacks or whatever.
What's that mean, Maureen?
Commercial, town center, commercial.
It's at the end of the runway. It's part of it's a dead zone.
I got a question though, so how many, cars were you guys able to dispose of, like crush and like junk stuff to?
Well, I think he did about 12,000.
About 12,000, so I mean, if you.
But if you count, if it's take all the pickup cabs and the beds and this, and you start putting it together, and the stuff comes in daily like that.
But is
you
that all,
could-
but is that stuff from within our county?
That's just here, and we do receive them from Plumas County with junk slips. There's nobody in this county that's ever wrote a junk slip. They're afraid to.
But how many cars have you helped clean up in Lassen County that would otherwise still be?
I would say
sitting
if you put them all together as a car,
there? Yeah.
I would say it'd exceed 20,000.
So I
Whether
guess
it's
what I'm
pieces or
saying,
not.
so if you guys weren't offering that service, there'd be just like thousands of cars still out in the.
Yeah.
Well,
and-
Brian Phillips offers the service. He has a use permit, and granted, the conditions are different
For
because,
car crushing?
yeah, he's a
He does.
fully licensed, but his permit is from the 80s, and so Mr. Glenn is right. The conditions that were placed on, one person in the 80s are going to be very different from what's placed on somebody in today's day.
And he's, M1.
I don't know. He's,
With Brian Phillips
yeah.
and Tim?
M2 heavy industrial.
I think the difference though in that, it being M2, and I think he brought it up earlier, is you can dig a post hole and you got a water well. Back then, they built all the logging stuff, sawmills, they all built it where there was a meadow where they had horse logging, and it's close to the river, and, you know, I think maybe where my son chose a high ground, sandy soil, that's where it should be. My son owns another piece of M1 at the other end of the airport. It's not a great place without 10,000 yards of fill being put in there because of the same condition. It gets wet, it turns to mud, whatever. You need a, like I say, I think you need a high piece of ground, sandier soil, both facilities where we're at now and up the road have that condition.
Sounds like you wanna go to Bass Hill.
Bass Hill would not be a good place because,
No, I was just.
I mean, but you're dealing with, wildlife areas there, thing,
I
bad
was
soil.
talking about the dump.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You have bad soil there. I mean, I'm an old external engineering contractor, so I know dirt, I know soils and all that stuff. So Bass Hill's not a logical place either.
Okay, we need to move on, so, thank you, thanks for the input, appreciate it. So is there any other questions of staff, and then
Yeah, I
we'll-
have some
and afterwards, we're
questions.
gonna go to the public.
First, I want to thank Maury for putting this together. I was the one that instigated this, but I have some questions about some of this stuff. The online applications, where are we on those?
We just concluded our RFP process, and we've selected a vendor, and so we're moving forward, and hopefully we can get it purchased before the end of this fiscal year.
Will that speed up our permit process?
It will for some applications. It depends on the complexity of the plans that are being proposed. But for simple permits, certainly, you know, hopefully pay a small user fee and get a well permit or a septic or something that isn't very intense or doesn't have plan checks. Hopefully over, you know, just a matter of the internet.
I see in here many references to county code, and then you have state law and regulation and/or county code. Those county codes, is there any way we can minimize the impact of the county codes on our people that are trying to build stuff? And
Well, generally speaking, we're going to be adopting the 2013 Title 24 Building Code, and that's, you know, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's going to be the primary code requirement for building construction.
Yeah, and then I see local law in here. My fear is that we've layered in a bunch of codes and laws that don't necessarily have to be there, that impede progress, that impede growth.
Well,
Yeah,
specifics,
that's
I
a
don't
general
know,
comment.
but generally speaking, we're going to be complying with the 2013 Building Code anyway, because we have to anyway. But we need to adopt it because I'd like to propose through appendices that you can adopt through that code a variety of different improvements I think that will benefit Lassen County. Like one, for example, would be raising the square footage of exempt structures from 120 to 200, and that would accommodate a lot of carports. And carports is one of the issues, if we were going to talk about buildings next, that we run into frequently, because people buy them, they collapse in the snow, then they say, why didn't you tell me I needed a building permit, and there's all kinds of trouble. So
Yeah.
we'd like to rectify that, but the building code is the building code, and I'm not aware of anything that is more restrictive or requires more locally than what we administer in the Uniform Building Code.
Okay, I was looking through here, and you have these plan check for sprinkler systems, and you have a County of Plymouth MOU for plan check services. They do the plan checks?
We were in a situation where they were helping us significantly for a long time, because we had no ability in-house to do anything. Between them and a private consulting firm, Wildan Engineering, they have been helping us with plan checks. That's correct. And that is still a situation that we have offered to us. We're not doing it as often. We're primarily going through Wildan because Plumas
Yeah.
County has their own
Yeah.
plan checks to do. They pretty much dug us out of a hole.
Wildan's based where?
Sacramento and I think San Diego.
San Bernardino.
Yeah.
Oh,
We have been encouraging and developing internal staff. Our acting building official is now certified building official, as well our building inspector is just, several certifications lately. So we are advancing our own staff to get in a position to do more internally.
okay. On page 14, under high priority projects not yet scheduled, number 2, it's back to the runway, and before the board can adopt zoning requirements, it may be necessary. I keep seeing may and possibly related to that stuff. Well, I'd like to get rid of those. I'd like to be sure.
Get rid of the maze.
Well,
Shall?
get rid of
Oh, yeah,
may,
shall.
shalls, could be's.
I'll change
I
them all to
want
shalls.
definite answers. Yes, we can do it. No, we can't.
What page is that?
Page 14, under high priority projects not yet scheduled, bullet point 2.
Well, the PSA overflight zoning is the way to enforce a tool to enforce the airport land use plan.
What's that stand for?
Which part?
PSA.
Public Safety Overflight Zone. So they're in areas that are, either 1 or 2.
That's
And that's with all our airports, minus the one we haven't done anything with.
Yeah.
They all have that zone.
Okay. When was the last time we made amendments to the general plan?
Well, we've done amendments to the general plan on specific projects where we would, in a handful of items, but generally the comprehensive look at the general plan was 1999. It was adopted in 2000.
Do you think there's anything restrictive in that general plan to impede our growth and progress?
I think the general plan that was adopted in '99 is very ag-oriented. It, I think, promotes infill versus sprawl. So there are things like ag conversion findings and that kind of stuff that one could construe it as being limiting. And then, of course, one could argue that's what the plan was developed for and contemplated. So it depends on where you sit in your seat.
Well, I'm for ag all the way, and I think Bob understands that. But I'm also for growth. And I know that there's areas that we can improve our general plan to promote growth that we have failed or have not shown the willingness in the past to do. I'd like to keep your business as a revenue branch. I'd like you guys to be out there earning us money. And I think part of it is this general plan. And as we get into this possible growth in the Hurlong area, I'd like us to take a hard look at maybe improving some of that zoning and the way that is structured down there. And any other possible growth centers without harming the agriculture.
Happy to serve at the will of the board. You guys set the project list. And I want to answer all your questions, but I do want to bring up a few things on the building side.
Okay, go ahead.
Because there's a few things that are concerning to staff right now. One is our ag exemption for structures. I don't really see a lot of provision to do that. And it's presenting itself as a problem frequently when people are building things without a permit and they fall down and they get mad. And the other thing is I don't see any authority to disregard the uniform building code. So that's something I think we should have a workshop on. As well,
What are our liabilities on those ag exempts?
I dare not answer it. I would have to, I'd want to talk to our new county council about it, and I, like I said, I'd like to have a workshop on it.
But, Maury, how are we gonna, there's a lot of things in here that do, how are we gonna decide what to agendize and when, or?
Well, I'd like to ask you, maybe it'd be easy if I just ask you a few questions. Is marijuana, updating the marijuana ordinance a priority for the board, based on what the sheriff said and what I've said?
You mean as to where and?
Yeah, updating like, right, location.
Well, one of the things, I mean, if you open up the can, you could end up, the other.
You go the other way, that's for sure.
If you go either way, myself, I'm not in favor of changing it, I could leave it alone. If it went any different, I should make it, more, like, I'd be sure. But who knows if that's what it is. I don't know if it's a big deal if you actually have 3 plants in the front yard, you got them inside the house.
What if it's 30 plants in his front yard next to the bus stop?
And he's really
And there's
sick?
people coming and going all night long and you want to sell your house. How's that suit you?
We are.
You might get somebody to buy it quick.
We have protections to do to close his schoolhouse and all of it. You can't do that.
We don't have
It
any-
does not permit that.
What protection do we have?
Hey, Richard, can I get that ordinance? I've never read that.
We don't have any protection from sensitive spots.
I think we need to, at least have a discussion on it and see if we can tighten it up or
Well,
improve it. Certainly not go the other way.
why don't we get all the board a copy of the existing ordinance and agendize it?
It seems to me like at the last time we talked about it was the medical marijuana card and all that, we had all kinds of people around here, 2 or 3 selling marijuana for that. We got all that.
We shut down dispensaries
We shut down all
in the
that.
county. We say you can't cultivate, although we didn't really say what that means. And as Mr. Grouden said, I don't think anybody knows what that means. So really it comes down to regulating where it can be, how much it can be, and that's it. And it's not, this wouldn't be an attempt to stop people from growing plants, but would be an effort to identify areas that are not probably good locations,
Suitable.
or making it screen from view, or putting it inside your house. There's a ton of different options.
If you
And
want
we
to
can
make
get
it more
you,
restrictive, I would favor that. But not less.
and then also finally, way back when, the board decided that in a way to foster development of parcels, we would allow for this thing called incremental development. And that is where we allow people to, instead of having to come in and pull a permit for a septic, a well, and electricity all at one time, we will allow you to do a septic, a well, or a septic, and then you can get electricity. And it was meant to help people develop a home site. And I think it's probably had a lot of success for a lot of people. But it's also presented a lot of problems, that people just end up getting the electricity and they're camping there and there's no house, and it's in front of you today, that those situations are more and more frequent. So look for some direction on to continue that, or to have a workshop on it, or direction to discontinue doing that.
I think everything that is, seems to be of importance, that we should, seriously have a workshop. I mean, you're doing a lot of work to do this,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it shouldn't just be ignored. You say,
No.
look, there's a concern,
No.
and then it just, it's all for nothing.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
We need to follow through with this stuff.
Tuesdays with Maury.
I have one other thing, Maura, you're talking about, I know everybody kind of complains about it, I'm one of them a lot of times, but you have your permit issues, with some of the costs of some of these things. And even though it may seem like a lot, if you sit back and you think about it, I mean, to drive all the way up to Beaver to do one inspection on something for like $60, you can't do that. And so, I mean, what about some of the fees? I mean, as far as, they haven't been changed for quite a while, as to my recall, and, I mean.
Planning's super old, building is I think it was probably 2004. But definitely, I think what would be beneficial is because you don't know the truth. You know, everybody complains. I'd be the first one if I had to build a home to complain about the fees. But it's relative, and so I think what might be good for the board is to see, you know, how much does it cost in Shasta County, Plumas County, Modoc County, Lassen County, and that might give you some weather gauge to make some assumptions on whether to move forward with the fee study analysis. And I definitely know that our planning schedule is very old, over 20 years. So that's definitely not current. And then when you're having this internal debate with yourself, you have to decide how much recovery do you want? Is it 50%? Is it 40%? Is it 100%? Some jurisdictions are 100%. And that's a very immediate need, though, for managing staff. That doesn't work very well. But you have to decide that number before you really can decide whether you want to update your fees. So. But I'm all for it.
Is it possible to get a copy of all the fees that are associated with everything? And
Absolutely.
get a copy of that, just for our own?
Absolutely. I'll have it in your
But I mean,
boxes next week.
I think that it's, you know, you've done this, it's great, but, and I think it should be left up to you as a planning director to work with Richard, and as you see fit, things that need to be brought to our attention, just start agendizing them. We have a big proper discussion with input on each and every one of the items, you know, I mean, that's your job. It's not really for us to go through this document and say, oh, yeah, we agree with you with this, let's agendize that.
I would have been happy operating under that premise I was. You guys made me come here.
So, yeah, I mean, and then, you know, you refer back to this, we're agendizing this, and refer, you know, page 45.
I do look forward to being in front of you with the software update.
Otherwise, this
That's
is, you know, it's nice, and it's a lot of information, but it's gonna go nowhere, unless,
Well, with all due respect, we're going somewhere. We've made some huge strides in the past 3 years.
No, I'm talking about, you know, you bring up a lot of important issues,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so instead of saying to us, you know, well, how about, you wanna talk about, I think, you know, you and Richard should just start putting, agendizing stuff to do with this, document that needs fixing.
I'm perfectly good with that. We did this at the request mainly of Mr. Hammond, and I'm happy to go.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a summary of a goal list to where it would make your department more efficient.
Well,
What you
yeah.
think would do it
Again,
to get
this
us.
software update's gonna be huge, and
Yeah,
I
I
look
think it
forward
is.
to giving a demonstration to the board of what this technology can do, because
We're looking forward
it's
to
just a
that.
quantum leap, like I said.
Okay. We should try and move forward, cause, we're running an hour behind, I know this building is being used, I think.
3 o'clock.
So, why don't we, wrap this up? Is there any other quick things more you have?
There's a million things.
Yeah. But I think, I'd like to give, you know, my input would be just to start agendizing this stuff as you see fit, and we go through it all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just would be remiss.
Better take- yeah.
Yeah, I had a question, I'm sorry, Sheriff Brown's gone, but my question back to the marijuana thing is there any kind of influx of crime, you know, related to people breaking into somebody's house that's growing 30 plants or that kind of stuff? Is that on the upswing, or really, you know, nothing to it, or maybe Mr. Burns knows the answers to that?
An increase?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a noted increase. I think we have seen some events that have occurred that have a sort of, there's references made where there's, that it's over a dope deal gone bad, if you will. Or if you're talking about residential burglaries to steal marijuana plants, we've seen a few.
Yeah,
of
or
those.
vandalism for the same reason, or of whatever kind.
I don't know so much if we see vandalism, you know, people that are against the cultivation. and
Sure,
going
driving
in.
their car
I haven't
through it,
seen
or
those.
spinning donuts with a motorcycle.
I haven't seen people, or reports of people doing that, taking an effort to vandalize marijuana grows. I haven't seen any reports of that, but that doesn't mean that the sheriff hasn't become involved in any of those. Some things that they become involved in, of course, don't get referred to us. But I don't know if there's a dramatic increase that we've seen. We do see some events which have some reference to, people trying to get at the medical marijuana that's being grown either at a house, inside or out, an effort to steal those things. I haven't seen any real heavy-duty assaults that have come on the